In August, I made a trip to visit my dear friends the Magruders in Potter Valley, California. Mac Magruder is a beef rancher, one of California's most committed grass-fed ranchers, but also a visual artist. As it happened, Mac had recently celebrated his 65th birthday, and while we were there, a group of his friends had committed to a major cleanup and restoration of his ceramic studio. Some 20 folks gathered on Sunday, August 10th to tackle the task. I asked Mac about the history of the studio.
Actually, when I finished graduate school, I came back here, and my dad was sick with cancer, and I ended up taking over and running the ranch. And I moved into an old blacksmith studio that was just right on the river, maybe a 20-foot by 20-foot at the most. But it worked, and I did a couple of shows there, and it was very, very hard to deal with. So we had this Quonset hut that I'm sure my grandfather had gotten after World War II, and it was a beautiful space. And what's nice about a Quonset hut is it's usually 10 degrees hotter in the summertime than it is outside, or 10 degrees colder than it is outside. And so then I had to figure out how to insulate it, so we ended up insulating, putting insulation and then putting plywood on, and then in the inside, and putting a wood stove and making it comfortable. And after that, it was a beautiful space to work in. It was real nice. The studio is just a way to get away. You know, you can shut the door and kind of lock out the ranch, but not really. You're always listening to some cow bawling somewhere that's either upside down in a ditch or a calf in the road or something. So yeah, that's reality.
Mac spent years working in the studio to create his wonderfully surreal and often comical pieces.
This is called Cockfights.
The Russian River runs right through the middle of the ranch. There had been 2 major floods in Mac's lifetime. As it had earlier in his life, in December of 2005, disaster struck.
And every year there's a possibility that it'll flood, but it's only twice in my lifetime. And 64 was a 100-year flood. 05 was kind of mimicking 64, and so we started getting equipment out, and water kept coming up faster and faster. And the last thing we actually got to was my studio, and we went in and we started lifting just what we could and putting them on the tables. But water came up, and it came up to about 3 feet probably in the studio. It came up to exactly the same level that it did in 1964. When it flooded, the water got right up to the top of the boots here. And so all you could see was these waders with his devil's head sticking.
For 8 years, Mac avoided the place.
Well, first of all, I would try to go work in my studio, and it would be a cloud of fine dust. I figured that I could probably, after the water went down, I could probably just take a vacuum cleaner and vacuum it out, and that wasn't the case. It was a soup. I mean, it was, when you put a light on at night, you could only see about 3 feet. It was just solid suspended clay or silt that was in the air, and it was really unhealthy.
But what took you so long to clean it up?
I just couldn't really hire some guys to come in and do it, because they wouldn't, you just wouldn't have the sensitivity to what to save and all of that. So I just kind of didn't do it. I didn't have the time, and that was it.
But then one of his friends stepped up to help.
My friend Spencer, who's a pianist, and he has just recently, within the last 5 years, gotten into starting making sculpture, and so we consult on things, and he would come down to my studio and just say, you got to get this cleaned out. And he made the suggestion that, well, why don't we just get a bunch of people together and have a good time and do it? And so he organized it, and with the fanfare of my new son-in-law and daughter and wife, and about 19 people, or 21 people came, and we started about 7 in the morning, and it was a phenomenal accomplishment. It took pretty much all day. We ended up with a 16-foot by 7-foot big trailer pretty much filled with junk that ended up, it was either ruined or it was a nice way to go through your old stuff and filter it out of this space that was maybe 40 by 60 or something like that.
The day itself was an extraordinary event. Starting at 7 in the morning, people took on the task of cleaning out the workshop. One sculpture, one mold, one skeleton, one tool, one glaze, one cabinet, the drawers, and each table at a time. Everything not immediately considered trash was brought out to long tables for inspection, then cleaning up by power wash. The dust was kicked around and hung thick, but people kept going. Soon enough, the space was emptied out, and the cleaning began. The place was swept, hosed, and water sucked up by the gallon. By lunch, the job of evacuation was done. After lunch, the pieces were put back together, and by mid-afternoon, Mac had his studio back. I asked him, what was it like to return to a clean and organized studio?
Well, the first thing is you could take a breath, you could breathe, and it was a really nice to be able to. The studio has nice light, but when you walk in there and you would start to cough and gag, you knew something was wrong. So this was really fresh, and so I'm looking forward to getting back in there, if nothing else, to put my feet up and smoke a cigar or something.
Community is made of experiences like these. Helping Mac reclaim his creative space also helped all of us to think about how important creativity is in our lives. And it made us feel useful, simply useful. And that gift was much, much greater than the giving.